All right, it's that time of year, it's tax time, and junior doctors, as well as other allied health professionals, nurses, physios, senior doctors, junior doctors, first year doctors, I mean, we all need to know what we can claim on our deductions at work time. I'm gonna go through a little checklist and explain how you can claim these types of work deductions for your tax time. I think it's really important that we all learn how to do it ourselves. Of course, this is not financial advice or anything of that matter. This is just the bare bones, bare understanding, which can actually just help you understand the language and just understand the basics of what we need to do and learn about in terms of our financial health. It's often put into a too hard basket by us health professionals because we don't have time, we don't understand, we have other things that we'd rather do. It doesn't take away from the fact that we should actually try to understand what's going on. We'll go through it step by step. There's heaps of free resources online. They'll all be in the description, so check them out. So let's get to it. All right, so let's go through the ATO website. As you can see here, this is for doctors, specialists, and other medical professionals, and it goes through the income and work-related deductions that you can do. So essentially, it has a few different options here. You can have a quick summary cheat sheet, which is summarized into a 2-page PDF, which you can download. I'll link this in the description. This goes through just the quick summary of all the deductions, but I'll go through the deductions in detail so you can actually understand what is going on with it. So it breaks it up into 3 different sections. You've got your income and allowances, record keeping for your work expenses, and then the deductions section. So I think it's probably most useful to spend some time on the deduction section, and it breaks it up into a few different categories just based on the letter of the alphabet. Let's go through the first section, which is just A to F. There's a quick summary of the list of topics that we're going to go through here. The first one is all about your professional membership fees. So this one is all to do with, you might be paying a subscription fee or a membership fee to an organization. Potentially it could be the AMA, which is the Australian Medical Association. I know I have a membership with them, and there's a couple of other, membership bodies that you might pay a subscription fee for. You can claim that on your tax deduction as a work-related expense. You can also claim what's called an annual practicing certificate fee. So if you're a medical officer and you want to practice, then you need to register to be able to practice. And for doctors, that is with APRA. So you have to pay a fee in order to be a doctor and in order to work as a doctor. You can claim that fee as a tax deduction. You can look at this example here, which pretty much just shows exactly what I was saying. Brendan needs an annual practicing certificate to work as a doctor. He can claim a deduction for the cost of renewing his practice certificate each year because he incurs that expense to be able to work as a doctor. So that's that. It's pretty straightforward. All right, the next section is about your books and journals. Pretty much if you have a book or journal that you want to buy, maybe it's a medical textbook or something like that, you have to consider how much it costs, and they make a specification if it's $300 or less or more than $300. So if it's $300 or less for a book or a set of books, then you can claim the whole thing. But if it is more than $300, then you have to claim the decline in value over time. So that's the main thing to understand, just understanding the cost of the actual item or items that make up the set. This is a good example that goes through that. So Katie is a GP. She buys a medical book costing $350, and she does that in order to add to her professional library of books. She can't claim a deduction for the full cost of the book because it's more than $300, but instead she actually has to claim, well, she doesn't have to, but she can claim the decline in value of the book over time. There's a separate section, I think a bit later on in this work deductions tab, that you can actually figure out how to do that and claim the decline in value. So stick around for that. This is the same example, but it just illustrates that the book is part of a set of books. So each book costs $65, but because it's part of a set, you can't claim each book because the whole set together costs more than $300. So hopefully that makes sense. Yeah, just bear in mind, like $300 is the tipping point before deciding if you can claim the full amount or if you can only claim the decline in value over time. Car expenses is the next one. It is a little bit interesting. The main thing to understand is that, going from home to work is not really a deductible expense. There is a little section if you're carrying like bulky tools and equipment, but we'll go through that in a little bit. The main thing to say for majority of people is that when you go from home to work, that's not deductible. It's only deductible when you go from work to work. One good example is Fadia is an employee cardiothoracic surgeon. She travels from her consulting rooms, which is her regular workplace, to the hospital where she performs surgeries. She can claim a deduction for the travel between the consulting rooms and the hospital because that's work to work. So that's a really good distinction, but she can't actually make a deduction for the travel between home and the consulting rooms because that is considered a private expense. To illustrate the example of the bulky equipment, we've got one here. It says, Stephen is an employee GP. He takes a couple of his patients' medical records home to review. The files fit in one box. He can't claim the deduction of the cost traveling between the medical practice and his home. The records are not bulky, and that's a private expense. Interestingly, so we go back up to the top here, they make a distinction in terms of the tools and whether you can claim that trip from home to work if it meets the following criteria. So the tools or equipment are essential to perform your employment duties. The tools or equipment are bulky, and that is because the size and weight and they are awkward to transport, and they can only be transported conveniently using a motor vehicle. And there's no secure storage for such items at the workplace. I'm trying to look at some examples of this. Let's just try to find any on this page. Examples of bulky work items. Let's have a look at this one. All right, so here's an interesting one. So I'm on this accounting website, ITP Professionals. So it says the equipment must be bulky. The ATO states it must be 20 kilos and over to be considered big and cumbersome enough to make this tax deduction. Let me know if you find more information about the item in terms of how bulky it is and if you can claim such an item. I'm thinking if you need to, carry like a defibrillator. Personally, I don't really need anything. I just need my bag, a laptop. You can, pop like a stethoscope or some other stuff in your bag. It's not an issue. So I can't really claim that as an expense, but some people might. For the travel expenses for your motor vehicle, you can use these two different methods. The main thing is there's a logbook method and there's a cents per kilometer method. Let's just go through this now. So logbook method, pretty straightforward. Essentially, it's all about keeping an actual logbook of every time you travel and then working out what percentage of your travel is used for business. So tells you how to do it there. Let's just go straight into the example. That'll make it much, much easier. So let's go through this. Tim's logbook shows that he's traveled 11,000 kilometers at the end of the income year. 6,600 were for business related purposes. That is 6,600 kilometers. To work out the percentage of car travel related for business expenses, all you do is you take that 6,600 and you divide it by the total amount of travel, which is 11,000. Doing that, you work out that it's about 60% of travel for business related purposes. So you've worked out that 60% of the travel expenses are business related. And then Tim's also worked out that he actually spends $9,000 for his travel expenses. So 60% of 9,000 is the claimable amount. So that's $5,400. Now, obviously you have to put in a bit of work. You need to have a logbook. You need to show like what the actual fuel and oil costs are. You need to do the odometer readings. So how far you've traveled before you start and after you start, and then evidence of all your car expenses. So it's a bit of, effort, I think, but it's one way of doing it. Let's go through to the other one. So this is the cents per kilometer method. So this allows you to claim up to a max of 5,000 business kilometers per year. It doesn't require any evidence, but you might be asked to work out how you actually did it in the first place. And yeah, so you've got different rates that are set for different years. For this tax period, it's 85 cents per kilometer. So you can pretty much up to a max of 5,000 business kilometers per car per year can be claimed via this. So you just work out how many kilometers you travel. So let's just get up a little calculator here. So say it's 10 kilometers between your workplace and another workplace. So if we go back to that initial example, Fadia was traveling from her consulting rooms to the hospital, and say it's 10 kilometers between the consulting rooms and the hospital. So then what you do is you work out how many times you do that trip each year. Say, I don't know, it's 200 times per year. Then that is 2,000 kilometers that you've done each year. It's 2,000 kilometers that you've done between workplaces that are eligible to be claimed on tax. And then because that's the total number of kilometers and it's 85 cents per kilometer for this tax year, then you just multiply by 0.85 because that's dollars. That's essentially how you do it. And it can add up, if you do a lot of traveling between workplace sites. But you can figure out which one is right for you and go from there. The next one is childcare. It just says that you can't claim the cost of childcare when you're working. It's a private expense. There you go, pretty straightforward. For clothing and uniform expenses, the main thing is that you can't claim like traditional conventional clothing. So there's a lot of doctors who might on the wards just wear like normal clothes. They might wear shirts and pants and maybe some boots or some other smart casual sort of thing. They list some good examples here. So a judge's robes or a chef's checkered pants are occupation specific. The main thing is that they distinguish between conventional clothing and then clothing that fits into one of these 4 categories. So for conventional clothing, you might see people wearing like smart casual or just sort of neat attire instead of like scrubs. And that's not considered like occupation specific or protective or compulsory uniform. So you can't really claim that. But say you might purchase some specific shoes for the operating theatre, which are like closed shoes. They're protective, they're supportive for you to protect you against like certain hazards in the operating theatre, then those could potentially be claimed. You could also claim if you have a compulsory uniform that the hospital or workplace expects you to wear. You can't actually claim a deduction, as it says here, if your employer buys, repairs or replaces your clothing. So I guess one example is you can't claim the scrubs that they give you in the hospital, in the theatre. So because they supply the scrubs, they wash the scrubs and do everything like that. So that's just one example to understand. They go through a couple of examples here as well. Of course, you can't claim your driver's license. That's a private expense, but you can claim a deduction for additional costs you incur to get a special license or condition in order to perform your work duties. So if that happens, then you can do that, but I haven't needed to do any of that. You can't claim entertainment and social functions. That's pretty straightforward. Of course, people might know that you can salary package up to a certain extent. Some salary packaging caps around like the 2,500 mark for meals and entertainment. So that is not a tax deduction. It's slightly different, but salary packaging and tax deductions are pretty similar. So just understand that if you say are Benjamin and you attend a monthly breakfast by a medical association, at these breakfasts he networks with his colleagues and shares information, but he can't claim the deduction of attending the breakfast even though they're related to his work. So that's just something to understand, that you can't claim that sort of stuff. You can't claim fines or penalties when you travel to work. So that's good to know. But you can actually claim the cost of, say, a first aid training course. That is sort of like a medical professional expense, as it says here. If you're expected to do it and your employer doesn't offer it, or you need to do it in order to practice. This first aid course thing is sort of like around the same bracket as registering to be a doctor and practice as a doctor, like the APRA registration. So If you need to do it in order to work, then that sort of leans itself to being a deductible expense. So hopefully this is all helping so far. I mean, most of this stuff is just free to access information on the ATO website. It's all public. All the links are in the description. It's just designed to give you a brief overview of everything. Of course, if you need specific stuff, go to a specific person to get that advice. Yeah, often at times I think doctors neglect their financial health, and this is one of the ways that I've tried to sort of support that, learn heaps, learn as much as I can. Anyways, let's crack on. We'll do expenses G to O. The first one is glasses, contact lenses, and anti-glare glasses. Now you can't actually claim a deduction for prescription glasses or contact lenses, but you may be able to claim a deduction on specific protective glasses or goggles or something like that. So you might see these people like in operating theaters or doing procedures have like these good glasses that they can invest a bit of money in. Yeah, some people have like glasses or magnifying glasses or like a headlamp or a head torch that they use in the operating theater. That potentially could fall under this category, as well as just your standard like protective goggles and things like that. So keep in mind that if it's specific, it has like a specific use and purpose. That's the important distinction to make. So just ask yourself that question, if it's specific and serves a purpose in terms of the medical field. I don't know why they've listed grooming expenses. This is interesting. I don't know why they've listed that here for deductions for work expenses, but you can't claim hairdressing, cosmetics, and hair and skincare products. So yeah, I don't know. That seems pretty private and pretty straightforward, but it's good that they've clarified. The laundry and maintenance is a cool thing. So you can actually claim your laundry and maintenance costs for wearing work clothing. And one thing that all doctors could probably claim is if they wear scrubs to work, then if they wash the scrubs, you can claim that. So the two distinctions they make is $1 per load if you just wash the items from work. So say you just do a load of all scrubs, then that's $1 per load. And if you mix those scrubs in with different clothing, potentially just like your normal clothes and stuff, then that's half of that, so 50 cents per load. It could add up. You might do one load a week, which is, $52. You don't have to keep records if it is $150 or less, but you might do heaps of loads and then it's more than that. So having some sort of like Google Doc in a drive or something where it says, well, I did 72 loads of washing this year and 50 contained scrubs only, and then the rest were mixed, so I get this amount. So I don't know, it's just some quick maths that you could potentially do, but I don't know, it's a little bit of cash that you can add to your tax deduction. Here's a good distinction to make. So yeah, Nathan is an employer, he's a surgeon. This hospital provides the scrubs to Nathan. He leaves them in the dirty scrubs hamper when he changes back into his own clothes to leave the hospital. He can't actually claim a deduction for that because the hospital does the laundry expenses, not him. So that's one thing to consider. But if you do this washing at home, then you get to claim it. So let's talk about meal and snack expenses. So during normal work hours, you can't claim anything. They're considered private expenses. So if you forget to pack lunch and you need to buy lunch at a cafe, then you can't claim that. But if you work overtime and then you buy and eat the meal in your overtime period, then you can actually claim that. There's also something about, claiming meals when you're traveling overnight for the purpose of work. Medical equipment, just quickly before we go into the overtime meal expenses, is similar to like the books and journals section. If it's $300 or less, then you can claim it. So something like a stethoscope if it costs less. But if it costs more than $300, then it's the same sort of thing. You can claim a deduction for the decline in value over time. And I think there's a separate section later on which goes through that. For the overtime meal expenses, you need to just satisfy the following criteria. You need to have a meal that you buy and eat during your overtime. You can't just buy it and then eat it the next day. I don't know how someone would approve that, but I guess a bit of an honesty policy. Yeah, and then you just need to satisfy these following things. So you need to actually receive an overtime meal allowance. the allowance needs to show up on your income statement, and the allowance is to be included in your tax return as income. So once those few criteria are satisfied, ATO then goes on to say that generally you need to keep evidence when you claim a deduction for certain things like receipts. But then each year they say that they set this reasonable amount that you can claim as overtime meal allowance that doesn't really need receipts and stuff. So yeah, it's interesting, but they don't really specify this reasonable amount. I mean, best practice, probably just keep the receipts for stuff you're going to claim. And then if someone asks you, or if they say, oh, that's more than the reasonable amount, then you just have the evidence to show them. But there's some more details there. All right, next section, P to S. Parking fees and tolls you can't claim. Narita is an employee physiotherapist in a hospital and pays $50 per week for on-site staff parking. She actually can't claim that parking. Okay, but when can you claim it? So Yasmin is an employee practicing psychologist. She travels from her workplace to deliver a presentation at a local university. She pays to park at the university. She can claim a deduction for the parking expense as she incurs the expenses on a work-related trip. Okay, that's interesting. So parking expenses from home to work, you can't claim, but if you go from work to work and then you pay for parking at the second work site, then you can claim that. It'd be interesting if you could claim, if you drove back to that original workplace, then you could pay for parking or claim parking then. Yeah, that's kind of interesting. But I guess if it's from work to work, then the expenses that you incur in that work to work travel, then you can claim that. Protective equipment and items sort of falls under the earlier classifications of like clothing and footwear and stuff. If it's specific, then you can probably claim it, but if it's not and it's more general, then you can't claim it. And you also can't claim the stuff if the employer supplies it, or if they get you to pay but then they reimburse you. For your phone and data and internet, you can actually claim that. You just have to work out the proportion of your time that you spend doing work stuff. You can't claim the personal time, you can claim the work portion of your time. There's a couple of examples here which nicely illustrates that. Essentially, I'll just skip to this one. So it says Sebastian works out his claims for work calls for work purposes are as follows. His total work calls is divided by the total number of phone calls. And then that's the percentage of his phone use that he uses for work. So it ends up being 30%. Then because his total bill each month for his phone is $49, then he can claim 30% of that bill each month, because the 30% is the proportion that he uses for work. And then you multiply that by how many times you've paid that phone bill in that financial year. So that's good. The same thing can be done with your internet usage too. The interesting note for professional library stuff is that reference books can only be included in your professional library if the contents of the book are directly relevant to your employment duties. So a good example here is if you're a family law solicitor, a reference book on divorce settlements and child custody would be relevant to your duties. But you can't actually add textbooks you buy and claim as self-education expenses. Yeah, interesting. So you can't actually add textbooks you buy and claim those as self-education expenses. Okay. Removal and relocation expenses, you can't claim if you need to move house. Repairs to tools and equipment, you can actually claim, but you can only claim the work-related proportion of those. So if you need to, I don't know, fix your stethoscope, then you could claim that. Or if you needed to fix your laptop, then I guess you could claim that if your laptop is a work-related laptop. Potentially extrapolating from other things, you'd need to chat to someone about it, but if you use your laptop 50% of the time for work, then if you needed to fix it, potentially that's like 50% of that cost if you need to fix it that you could claim. All right, let's go on to self-education expenses. So you can claim a deduction for self-education expenses if it directly relates to your employment. So they make a few different distinctions here. So it needs to maintain or improve the skills for your current duties, or it can increase your income for your current employment. You can't claim a deduction if it doesn't have a connection with your job, or it's a general relation to your job, or it enables you to get employment or change employment. You can't add textbooks you buy and claim. Okay, so that makes a bit more sense. If you claim the textbooks as self-education expenses, you can't also claim it as professional library expenses. That makes sense. And you can't claim your loans that you have, like a fee or help loan. All right, here's a good example to clarify this study and self-education expenses. So Yui is a psychologist working part-time for a private practice while studying to become a paramedic. When she completes her study, she'll apply for paramedic positions, and the study will primarily provide her with skills for her new position. So she can't claim the self-education expenses because her specialized study relates in only a general way to her current employment. The course will enable her to change her employment. So she can't claim because it's a limited role in her current role. So that gets back to this point here where it says you can't claim a deduction for self-education if it enables you to get employment or change employment. It's only improving the skills in your current duties, or it's going to result in an increase in your income for your current duties. Essentially, the ATO is saying you can either like improve your income in the job, or you can maintain or improve your skills for that current job. You can claim seminars, conferences, and training courses. They make a distinction if it's work-related and private purposes, but that's pretty straightforward. Let's go on to the final section, which is T to W, tools and equipment. So we made this distinction earlier. This sort of theme keeps repeating itself. There is this section here, which is the depreciation and capital tools allowances. Allows you to work out the decline in value over time. I would suggest watching this video. It talks you through how to use this tool. There's also a calculator which allows you to figure out how to use it as well. Now, let's see if it's going to log us in pretty quickly. Otherwise, we might need to do this. Brilliant. Okay, website is currently unavailable. Anyways, work out how to use that tool from the video, and then I would go and access the calculator as well to help us out with that. So that's for tools and equipment. It's the same thing with $300. If it's less than $300 or $300 itself, then you can claim it. But if it's more than $300, then yeah, you need to claim the depreciation over time. You can claim the travel for work if it's, if you need to travel somewhere for work, or if you need to sleep away from home in order to perform your work duties. All right, here's a good example illustrating work travel with private component, which delineates what you can and can't claim. So Jihoon's employer requires that he travel interstate to meet with a client, but then his employer allows him to extend his stay to have a bit of fun in the city, see some tourist attractions, stuff like that. He kept all the receipts for his expenses. Upon his return, the employer reimburses him for the work-related travel costs. This includes his flights, accommodation, meals, and any incidental expenses. He can't claim a deduction as he's been reimbursed. That's really important. And then the period in which he extended his stay to, explore the city and, see tourist attractions can't be claimed as well. Even though they were on initially a work-related trip, then it turned private, so you can't claim that because it's a private section. Last few ones, we've got watches and smartwatches. For watches and smartwatches, it just depends if it's a specific work-related function or not. I was trying to think of like watches that could be claimed, but I guess the only thing I can think of is like, yeah, as they mentioned here, a nurse's fob watch. That's a specific watch for a nurse to have. But in terms of like general watches, like you can't claim like a big Garmin or whatever other watch you're rocking at work. Most people don't wear watches now because it's like bare below the elbow sort of thing where you can't wear anything from your elbows down. So most people don't wear much below your elbows. But yeah, I guess for a nurse's fob watch, you could claim that because it's a specific work-related expense. All right, the last thing is working from home, and there's a whole range of things that you can claim. Yeah, there's some stuff that you can't claim, like if it's just general like coffee, tea and milk and other household items. Yeah, I think for the working from home expenses, the best way to go about it is using this home office expenses calculator. This goes through a whole bunch of things where you can work out if you can claim them or you can't claim them, and just talks you through all those bits and pieces. So let's see if this calculator works. No, it's also unavailable. Amazing, ATO. So that's brilliant. Maybe I'll add this in a later bit, showing you like a little overview of how the home office calculator works. But I would just go through that and work out how you can, what you can and can't claim essentially. That is all the deductions for the work expenses. It goes through, there's a little checklist here, which I'm gonna link in the description. Yeah, essentially it's just a 2-page PDF document that you can have a look through. That's a summary, and it's just a quick cheat sheet. So you might have watched the video, but now you just want a quick summary. I'd just go to this, and then you'd make like a little list about what you can and can't claim. And that's a good way to structure or group things if you've spent a lot of money relating to work throughout the financial year. So hopefully that helps. A little bit of a breakdown that you can actually just understand basic things, and then for this tax time you can get your stuff sorted, but for more importantly for the year coming up. Yeah, hopefully that helped. If you have any other questions, let me know. We'll go through them in another video. But basic tax time toolkit for doctors and other healthcare professionals. So there you go. We'll see you next time. Bye.